Good afternoon. Everybody, thank you for coming into this afternoon's workshop. I appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to be here today. My name is Terry Glavin. I am an attorney at the Department of Procurement Services. On behalf of Mayor Rahm Emanuel and my Commissioner, Chief Procurement Officer Jamie Rhee, I want to welcome you and again say thank you for being here. I'm going to do my best to make this valuable time spent for you. And I'm going to run through a series of topics that I think will be beneficial to you as you move forward to doing business with the City of Chicago. So that is the topic for today. It's doing business with the City of Chicago. What I'm going to ask is if we could refrain from questions and answers from me till the end of the session. We will cover those so that we can make sure we get through the material today. And at the end, I'll stick around as long as you'd like and answer those questions that you have. And I'll be happy to stick around for very specific questions if you'd like to talk after the session. I'd be happy to stick around. With that in mind, I want to do one additional thing. I want to give you my contact information because in addition to providing you information today, I want to be an ongoing resource to you. If I'm not the best resource at the city for you in the future, I'll do my best to locate and connect you with the best resource. But you can reach me by email. So it's my name. It's Terrence.Glavin, that's TERRENCE.GLAVIN at cityofchicago.org. And a number where I can reach at the city is 312-744-0851. And if you fail to get that information or you get back to your office or home and realize that you wrote it down slightly wrong, keep in mind that this whole session is streamed live on YouTube and kept on YouTube. So you can go to the Department of Procurement Services located on YouTube, and you can watch these videos again. Any of our workshops you can watch again, including this one. So please feel to reach out to me in the future. If I can be of assistance, I'll do my best. Now, some of the topics we're going to cover today include the mission of the Department of Procurement Services. I think it's important that you get to know a little bit about my department, the laws that govern the procurement process, types of procurement, certification issues, contract monitoring and compliance, programs and bid incentives, navigating the DPS website, and again at the end we're going to cover questions and answers. Now, when you're getting started with doing business with the City of Chicago, you're going to get familiar with the Department of Procurement Services. Now, the Department of Procurement Services is the contracting authority for the City of Chicago. It's my department. We're responsible for putting contracts into place to build business relationships between you and the city, to provide goods and services that we'll purchase from you. And we do it with integrity, public trust, and we're guided, not only guided, but we're in compliance constantly with the law. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the laws that apply to the procurement process today. Now, at the closest level, we comply with the Chicago Municipal Code. There's a section that creates our department and lays out the structure of our department and how we conduct our business. And if you're interested in looking at it, which I encourage you to look at it, it's section 2-92 of the Chicago Municipal Code. If you're ever interested in looking at it, there's an easy way to do it. You don't have to go to your local library. You can go to amlegal.com. That's AMLEGAL.com. That's the authorized publisher of the Municipal Code online. Go to 2-92, and actually there's an easy way to get through it. When you get to amlegal.com, there's a map. You click on the map, State of Illinois. There's a list of municipalities and other governmental units. You look for City of Chicago, click on City of Chicago, and it'll take you to the Municipal Code. If you look on the left, you'll see there's all kind of sections. You just look for 2 and then open it up to 292, and it's the ordinance that creates our department, empowers my commissioner, who's the Chief Procurement Officer for the city, Jamie Rhee, and it, again, lays out the structure for what we do. We also live by the Illinois Municipal Purchasing Act, Section 65 ILCS 5/8-10-1. And if you just take Illinois Municipal Purchasing Act, plug it into a search engine on the internet, you'll get that statute on your first page of search results. I almost guarantee it. And I'm not, again, telling you that you need to go out today and read through all these statutes and ordinances. But what you're going to get to understand as this workshop continues is procurement is, to a large extent, based on competition. And that competition is based on rules, the Illinois Municipal Purchasing Act and the Chicago Municipal Code. And whenever you have competition according to rules, if you're going to be a good competitor, what's the best thing to do? It's to get familiar with the rules, right? It at the very least allows you to compete fairly. And if you really know the rules, it might even give you a good competitive advantage in the competition. And I'll explain how this competition works as we go on today and we talk about doing business with the city, but keep that in mind. And the last area of laws I want to point out, when we have federal funding, even if it's $1 of federal assistance, there are federal laws that apply. So we have to keep all that in mind as we're creating our procurement process, conducting it, and awarding contracts. Now, what are the types of procurement? Well, we have small orders, competitive bids, requests for proposals, requests for qualifications, and we have what's called job order contracting, or JOC. And I'm going to run through each of these in a little more detail. What I also want to point out is, before we go further, today's about doing business. It's a little high level, but it's about the whole concept of getting into a business relationship with the city from seeing that ad in the paper for an opportunity to getting payment for your goods delivered or your services delivered. I also teach another workshop. It's Procurement Fundamentals, and I get into finer detail about the technicalities of the procurement process. So if you're interested in getting into finer detail, there's another workshop. There are a couple other topics like certification and a few other matters I'll be talking about today, JOC included, where I'm going to stay at somewhat of a higher level, not great detail. And the only reason for that on those topics is, again, those are offered in more specific workshops to those topics. So if you look outside here, or if you go online, or if you get one of the handouts, we have our workshop schedule. So if there's something that sparks your interest, like for example, JOC is unique to construction. If you're in the construction industry, you might be interested in going to a JOC workshop. If you're in information technology, you sell software or sell computer hardware, JOC may not be of much use to you or of much interest. You might just want to go just because you want to be familiar with all of procurement, but you get the idea. So be familiar with what workshops we have because you might learn a lot more detail about what you're interested at an additional workshop. So, small orders. Small orders are, according to Illinois statute, contracts that are under $100,000. We also talk about it in the municipal code. So, what's so special about small orders, other than the fact that it's for under $100,000? Well, there's no formal bid specifications or public advertisement required. Doesn't mean that we don't go through a formal process. We still put together, solicit and receive quotes. By statute, we can receive them or solicit them by a more informal process, including telephone, fax, or written quotation. And we can advertise by posting on the website of the Department of Procurement Services. That is, for example, a little different than what I call large order or normal size projects, like over $100,000. By law, we advertise those in print media. And for example, we have a contract with the Sun-Times where we post projects, we advertise, we solicit bids and proposals that are over $100,000 by publicizing through the newspaper. Where I'm going at with all this is we advertise our opportunities, right? They're not just contracts that we keep to ourselves and award without putting the word out. Because the nature of competition is, in theory, that the more competition we have, the better pricing we're going to get, right? So we want to get the word out, and we want to get as many vendors interested as possible in our solicitations. So a couple things you want to do if you're interested in opportunities. Keep an eye out on the Sun Times. Look, it's in the classified ad section. If you look at the classified ad section, you'll see it's almost like a grid, and there's little ads taken out by a lot of governmental units, not just us. Metra, Chicago Transit Authority, Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority. So there's a whole bunch of agencies that may have opportunities out there. And I encourage you to look at all the other agencies as well, not just our opportunities, because you never know where you're going to be able to get business from in the public sector. I'm going to answer your question. Okay, great. Well, we're going to save questions till the very end, if everyone doesn't mind. I appreciate that, sir. So yes, look for all the opportunities out there, but small orders, we will send out, not necessarily through the newspaper, although we can, but we're allowed by law to solicit them through these more informal processes if need be. And the real logic behind it is there's smaller purchasing that, based on the cost, based on the amounts involved, that legally that formal requirement's not mandatory. In those contracts, City of Chicago certified MBE, WBE vendors are solicited first, and MBE, WBE compliance is required for bids over $10,000. I said MBE, WBE. I'm sure some folks in the room, I know we had some conversation earlier, so some folks in the room know what MBE, WBE is, but just in case, MBE stands for Minority Business Enterprise, WBE stands for Women-Owned Business Enterprise. There are a couple other certifications. I'm going to talk about those in a slide later in the session. But just a little warm-up to it. Basically, there are certain firms that are owned by individuals or group of individuals that are considered historically disadvantaged in government contracting or City of Chicago contracting. And so what the municipal code has created, and even federal law has created, certain opportunities that are opened up for certified firms to either participate in certain proportions on contracts as subcontractors, or to get a certain competitive advantage maybe as a prime contractor on certain contracts if they're bidding as a prime. But I'll talk in more detail about that later. And also there's a separate workshop on how to get certified, and then once you're certified, what you do with your certification to make to get the best benefits from it. So there's other workshops on that matter as well. Now, what about if we have a project that we believe we're going to spend over $100,000? Well, then it's not a small order. And I mentioned earlier, we advertise in the Sun Times, we advertise in the classified ad section, we put it up on our website, which is another place where you're going to see opportunities. We also put hard copy opportunity lists in this room, and we also can send out electronically opportunities. So sign up for what's called DPS alerts, and you can get electronic notification of opportunities as well. The bid and bond room here, as I mentioned, we have opportunities posted here in City Hall, room 103. Bid solicitation periods are 10 to 30 calendar days, and keep in mind that there might be a bid deposit, maybe even a bid fee on certain projects, but it'll state, when you come in, you pick up the bid package and you open up the bid package with all the details of a project, you'll see whether or not there's a bid deposit required and whether or not there's a bid fee. Bid fees are pretty are the exception. Just so you know, a bid fee is a non-refundable fee, but it's usually for huge projects where there is a great deal of expense and administrative time put into developing specs and developing the project. Like it might be, I'll just draw an example, building out one of the terminals at O'Hare Airport. I mean, you can imagine with all the architecture, engineering, construction, computer hardware, computer software, the list goes on. With all that complexity, all the human and financial resources that go into just developing the project, a bid fee sometimes is involved just to reimburse the city for some of those costs. But otherwise, typically there's not a bid fee. Might be a bid deposit, but a bid deposit is returned if you don't win the contract. And so it is something that is refundable. It's more of an assurance to us that you're committed to your bid once you submit it. Now, let's say you pick up a bid package, you're reading through it, looks interesting to you, and you realize you have some questions, or you just want to know more about the project. Well, there might be a pre-bid conference. Pre-bid conference might be a meeting at the city, could be at the department that's handling the project once the contract's awarded, could be at one of their conference rooms, could be here at City Hall, could be a site inspection. Maybe it's a major construction project, and there's really a need for the vendors, if they're going to bid properly, to know what the site looks like and at least do a visual inspection of what they're getting themselves into. So a pre-bid may include a site inspection or just may include a meeting. And at that meeting, vendors are allowed to ask questions, and the city will provide written answers. If the city provides written answers, they're called clarifications. Sometimes the questions are so good that they make us realize that our specs are not perfect. And if there is a question, and even if it didn't come from a pre-bid, but if there's ever a time where the Department of Procurement Services realizes, hey, we got to change our specs a little bit because they don't make sense, or there's this little detail that sort of throws everything off, then what we'll do is we can change it by amending the specs or the solicitation, and we do that by way of addendum. So keep in mind there's a difference between clarification and an addendum. Clarification isn't changing the solicitation at all, it's just clarifying the matters for the vendors. If there's an addendum, it means we're tweaking the specs a little bit, changing them a little bit. And it might change your obligations a little bit if you get the contract. So make sure when you get an addendum, you realize that you got to read, or that you read the whole thing and you realize what you're getting into. Because when you submit your bid, you have to acknowledge by initialing all addendum. And so it's basically like you're saying, hey, this addendum is part of this contract that I'm agreeing to when I submit it as a bid. And it's important for you to know that that addendum means that there was some kind of change that you're agreeing to be bound by. So attendance at pre-bids, it can be optional, it can be required. So always read through the solicitation documents that you picked up, because if it was required and you don't show up and you bid, you could lose, even if you're the lowest bidder, because you didn't go to the site or to the pre-bid. And that would be a shame, right? So keep in mind, if a bid conference or a site inspection is required, you must be there. And that gets to one of the core issues I want to make sure I point out to you. By law, when we award contracts that are competitively bid, that includes construction, any other matter other than professional services or work services. I'm sorry, work services are competitive as well. But when we competitively bid a contract, we award them by law to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. There's three real elements to what I just said: that you're the lowest bidder if you're going to win the contract, that you're responsive, and you're responsible. Responsive means you handed in everything you were supposed to hand in, you signed the documents you submitted with your bid, the places you were supposed to sign them. If there was a pre-bid conference, you showed up to that pre-bid conference. That's being responsive. You did everything in the bid process that you were asked to do, especially the things you were mandated to do. Being responsible, the third element, is that you're presently capable of delivering what we want the way we want it. So what does that mean? That means that if we have a terminal at the airport that we need being built, you better have the personnel to complete the project, you better have the equipment, and you better have the financial capacity to pay your employees, to pay your subcontractors, and to carry the project to completion. That's what responsibility is. So you have to be lowest bid, responsive, and responsible. And getting back to what I was talking about on this topic, responsiveness includes, if there's an addenda out there and it says you must acknowledge by initialing each addenda and submitting it with your bid, if you don't put your initials on one of those addenda, we might be required to reject your bid, not just discretionary, right? Or if it says that you have to submit a schedule, a document listing what MBE, WBE firms you're going to use on the project, and list the company names and what their specialty area, and you don't submit those schedules with your bid, and it said in there you had to, that is being non-responsive, and your bid might be rejected. And it's a shame for everybody. It's a shame for you, the vendor, because you put all that time into preparing a bid, and you gave us the lowest price, and then you don't get the work. it goes to somebody else. So it's a shame for you because you lost all that time and the business opportunity. It's a shame for us because then we have to go to the second lowest bidder and we have to spend more. And so that's why we like to have these workshops and reinforce these issues, because it's better for everybody that you literally cross your T's and dot your I's when you're bidding on city projects. Okay, now this goes into a little more detail. I'll let you read it through. But again, there doesn't have to be a pre-bid conference, so read the solicitation package, figure out whether there's a pre-bid conference, and if there is one, attend it for sure if it's mandatory. I encourage you to attend it anyway if it's not mandatory. One other matter on pre-bid conferences. If you're a small business, whether you're a startup or you've been in business for a while but you're still getting off the ground, pre-bid conferences are a great place to network. And this is not about procurement fundamentals anymore. That comment is just a tip. If you're looking to grow your business, if you're not ready to bid as a prime yet, but you want to start learning how to work a city project and you want to get involved, show up to a pre-bid conference, introduce yourself to some of the primes, let them know you're out there. They might say, hey, I could use you on this project. Do you mind if I list you on my bid as a subcontractor? They might say, I already got someone for this project. I don't need you. But hey, it's good to know you're out there. I got a private project. I'll use you on that. Or maybe you want to joint venture with me on this or another project and we'll bid together. So pre-bid conferences are a good networking opportunity. I encourage you to use it for that in addition to gathering information about a project. I think I've exhausted this matter, but the slide basically talks about being responsive, right? Fill in all required information on your bids. Certain bid documents must be submitted and executed with your bid. Make sure if everything that's supposed to be in there, if you're putting your package together, make sure everything in the document that's supposed to be with your bid is actually in your bid submittal. Look for every signature line, sign every signature line, cross your T's, dot your I's, date where you're supposed to date. And lastly, if there are notaries required, make sure that you get signatures notarized. Lastly, make sure whoever's signing the document is somebody who has signature authority for the company. Now, if you're a small company and you're doing the bid yourself and you own the business, well, you're the principal of the company. You have signature authority, I would imagine. But for those larger companies out there, sometimes we'll get a bid and it's submitted by a sales representative. And that sales representative, it may not be apparent whether or not they have signature authority to bind the company contractually. So we like to see a president, or if there is not a president available for signature, and a secretary in support, maybe a board of directors authorization saying who in the company has signature authority, and hopefully that document also says that this specific person has signature authority. But bottom line is the contracts, amendments, addendum should all be executed by somebody who has the authority to bind a company. When you submit your bid, responsiveness also includes being on time. So submit your bid if it says 11 a.m. on the bid document, that's when the bid's due, 11:02 doesn't work. Because at a certain point, where do we draw the line, right? So we have these deadlines, and they are specific. So if we need a bid by a certain day at a certain time, get it in by that day, by that time, no later. Otherwise, we have to reject your bid. For bid fees, again, they're non-refundable. May be required for some bid submittals. Bid deposits usually are 5% of the bid and normally refundable, may be required for some projects. And then make sure you include any bid deposits in the proper form. Cash is not accepted by the city for this type of matter. Now what happens? You submit a bid, and what we do is we have a bid opening. Bid openings are Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. here at City Hall, in this room, Bid and Bond Room 103. They're literally opened and read aloud, and they're tabulated. Basically, tabulated means we digest the bids and put them together on a list so we can see what company bid what number. So we can literally see who's the lowest bidder. They're reviewed. We make sure that the vendors that submitted bids are responsive and responsible. And then bid tabulations can be viewed online at the DPS website 24 hours after bid opening. So if you submit a bid, you can actually go and see what your competitors bid, they can see what you bid, and you get an idea. So even though we didn't award that contract at that moment, you know where the race is at. Now, does that mean that as soon as you look online and you see that bid tabulation and you see that person has a contract with the city? No. We still have to complete our review. Contracts have to go through final review as far as making sure that they are proper form. The contract has to be reviewed and approved for legality, and ultimately, by law, mayor's signature has to be on it. Comptroller's signature has to be on the contract, and the commissioner of my department, Jamie Ree, her signature has to be on it. So there's a signature cycle. There's a bunch of steps. So what I'm getting at is there's a process when it's determined who's the lowest bidder. There's a little bit of time that passes between the time that we do bid opening and the time that you're actually doing business with the city. So plan your affairs accordingly is what I'm saying, as far as making sure you're working on your other business as well as the city's. And this is really a summary of that award process that I just described. We talk about responsiveness and responsibility, the review, and basically the flow of the review through the Department of Procurement Services, but it ultimately leads to a contract that is awarded to the most responsive and responsible bidder that offers the lowest price when we're talking about competitive bids. Now, there's a different process for professional services. I'll get into that right now. So why do we have a different process by law that applies to professional services? It's because professional services by law involve services that are of a high level of skill, usually requiring a related high level of qualifications. And what you are doing when you buy professional services is you're sort of conducting a balancing act to get the best value for the city, right? Because it's similar to your personal affairs, right? There are certain things you buy that are like necessities, they're common in nature, and if you have a household budget like I do, for a lot of items, you just look for the best price. Because at a certain point, a pencil is a pencil is a pencil, or paper towels are paper towels are paper towels. But when you get into professional services, like in your personal affairs, say you want a doctor. Do you just go to the newspaper and look for the best deal out there, the Sunday special on medical care from a doctor? No. You want to at least have a balancing of, you do have a budget, you want to make sure you stay in your budget, but you want the best health care you can get for your dollar, so you do a balancing act. And that's really what we do with RFPs for the city. When we need professional services, we do what's called an RFP, a request for proposal. And instead of receiving bids with the lowest prices, we solicit requests for proposals, and vendors submit written, persuasive documents explaining why they are the best vendor at the best value. So they will submit their proposals. They will talk about the in-house technical experts they have, perhaps. They will talk about the experience of their staff, their key personnel. They'll talk about maybe similar cities that they've done work for with similar projects. Like, for example, if we have an enterprise system, IT system for the city that we need updated, then what we might do is say, or look for, have you done this type of work for Los Angeles, New York, comparably sized cities that you might look to for similar experience. But at the end of the day, we award to the highest rated respondents. Now, what happens if we don't need just one vendor, but we need a pool of vendors? And an example is when we have work that we know we're going to need in general, but we don't know exactly when we're going to need it, and we don't know exactly the details of each section of work for a variety of reasons. And I always use as an example road work. Let's say, for example, Milwaukee Avenue in Chicago, right? It's an extremely long street. And let's say that we know one thing about Milwaukee Avenue. It's such a long street that when you start work at one end of it, by the time you get to the very end of it and complete your work, you probably have potholes or cracks at the beginning. So you're always working on these streets in the city of Chicago. And so you always need construction companies that do road construction, and you also need engineers that can support the construction companies on that road work. Also, what we know about it is funding comes in, federal funding, state support comes in, sometimes right away, sometimes it comes off. We don't know exactly when the funding is going to come in. Sometimes we have to wait for approvals to use the funding. So we don't know exactly when the work can be done, not done, when it has to stop sometimes, when it can reconvene. So you need a pool of vendors at the ready for when these projects are ready. And you can't decide at the last minute, oh, I just got some funding, well, let's advertise, because by the time you get some vendors in through that long award process, you've already lost a lot of time. So there are cases where we have pools of vendors. To get that pool together, we use an RFQ, that's request for qualifications. That's where we advertise requesting qualifications instead of a bid or instead of a proposal. And vendors submit basically like their corporate resumes. And by submitting their corporate resumes, we evaluate them. And if they're qualified to get into a pool, if they're in that pool, they are the exclusive competitors for upcoming projects within the scope of that pool. And when those projects come around, we will let the pool know what the specifics are of each of those projects. And if we award work, we will award it in accordance with a task order, which is like a mini contract on a project-by-project basis. And then when you're a vendor and you complete that work of the task order, you then go back in the pool and you wait for your next opportunity. Now, a couple key points about it is you might get plenty of work, and another aspect of RFQs is you might get no work. There's no guarantees of work when you're in a pool, but what it does allow is you to be in an exclusive pool so that when an opportunity does come around, you are getting that opportunity with at least a certain degree of amount of vendors excluded from that pool for a certain number of years. And that number of years is determined by the master agreement that is awarded to the pool. So that is a high-level view of RFQs. Now, I don't have a slide on it because it's really a quick comment, but there's an area in between commodities and professional services, and that area is work services. At least that's how we term it. So work services are services that are extremely valuable to the city. We use them all the time, but they're not considered by law highly skilled or professional in nature. Examples might be landscaping, might be security guard services. Again, extremely valuable. The city uses them all the time and needs those services. There can be licensing requirements for those that are in those areas of business. But at a certain point, they are somewhat common in nature as long as minimal licensing and qualifications are met. And so they are appropriate by law for competitive bidding. And so work services follow the same process I described for competitive bidding earlier. So competitive bidding is basically for commodities, common goods, where one item is the same as the next. You know, different vendors basically offer the same thing, so you can competitively bid. And then work services fall into that category. And then you've got professional services, and professional services are the ones that are by RFP or RFQ. So that's a little bit about the process for those areas. Now, what about small to medium-sized construction projects? There's a process called JOC. It's job order contracting. And I'm not going to get, as I said, into the deepest level of detail on this concept because there's a workshop specifically on JOC that's taught by the deputy of our construction unit, and he gives great detail. He gives a great presentation on it. So if you're in construction and you're interested in JOC, go to that workshop. But just so you're familiar with it, it's for small to medium construction projects. Basically, there was a price book developed at one time, and that price book broke down typical construction projects into tasks. There's a lot of projects that are small and medium-sized that have identifiable tasks. And each of those tasks was attached to a price, a unit price. and then basically vendors bid a discount off of that price. And so it's basically competitive bidding, but it's where each task is bid on. And ultimately the project is tabulated according to each of those tasks and the bid off of the price book. So I'm just going to give you that taste of it. If you're not in construction, it may not be relevant to you. If you have a busy work schedule, you might want to be working on your office matters or working on your business. But if you're in construction, I think it's a great workshop to go to. So I encourage you to go to it. Keep in mind, general contractors are solicited to respond to an advertised job specification which contains a unit price book, various construction tasks. Those tasks are described in a unit of measure, and there's a unit price for each task. And as I talked about, you bid discounts off of that task, off of the prices of each task. Okay. Now, the award is to the general contractor offering the most favorable adjusted factors against the price book. When I say adjusted factors, it was that discount I talked about. Work performed during normal working hours and work performed other than normal working hours. The value of the job contract depends upon departmental needs and budget. So keep in mind that projects, big and small, really do, and this is JOC and even on other matters, they start with the departments that are out there. They determine their needs. We are not really a buyer, right? Department of Procurement Services is not really a buyer. So this is basically a tip I want to throw out there. It goes beyond procurement technicalities. We put the contracts in place to create the business relationship between you and the departments. If you want to know what departments are out there, go to cityofchicago.org, go to the top menu. If you go to the top menu, it'll go to government. There's a tab for government. It'll drop down a drop-down bar, and it'll list all the city departments. I encourage you, if you're looking at doing business with the City of Chicago, click on all the different departments that you think might need your goods or services and start getting familiar with what their mission is. They might have posted on their webpage some special programs that are coming up. You can collect some information that might be helpful for you understanding what they may be buying in the future, and it might prepare you for upcoming solicitations. On that same menu, there's also a link to sister agencies, and those are all those other governmental units out there, like I mentioned, CTA, Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority, Public Building Commission. They all have their own procurement departments. We don't contract for those departments. So if you look at our website all the time looking for their opportunities, like for example, say you have an interest in painting CTA platforms. Well, if you're looking at our website all the time, you're going to miss the opportunity that might be out there, right? You need to go to the CTA website, look at the page for their procurement department, and see what needs they have for their CTA platforms. If you're interested in providing sporting goods equipment for the field houses in Chicago, in the parks, don't look at our website all the time. Go to Chicago Park District. They have their own purchasing department, and see what they have what their needs are as far as equipment. So you get the idea. Is keep in mind there are sister agencies out there. Don't miss the opportunities just focusing on us all the time, even though we do have a lot of opportunities. Certification. I talked earlier about MBE and WBE firms. So minority business enterprises, women-owned business enterprises. There are other historically disadvantaged groups, or I should say certifications related to historically disadvantaged groups. They include DBE, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. DBE is basically a federal designation. So if you're doing federal work or you're doing work on projects that are federally funded, the certification is DBE. It's basically MBE and WBE together. Now if you're doing work out at the airport, there's ACDBE, that's Airport Concession Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. So that is a certification that might be helpful. There's also BEPD, that's business enterprises owned by people with disabilities. And there is a workshop all about how to get certified, and once you're certified, what do you do with that certification? How do you benefit from it? But what you're going to learn is, in order to be eligible, the businesses must be owned at least 51% by a person or people that are a minority, a woman if it's a WBE, or women, in order to qualify for or be eligible for this type of certification. Under BEPD, the business must be at least 51% owned by a person or people that have a disability. Okay. Now, key point. You're sitting here, you're saying, oh, I'm eligible, but I'm not certified, so I can't do business with the city until I get my certification, right? No. You do not have to get your certification just because you're eligible. So if you see a project out there and you want to bid on it, or you want to be a sub on a project that you like, you don't have to be certified to do business with the city. But you don't get the benefits of the program. You're doing business just like every other vendor that's not certified then. But if you want the benefits of the program or programs, you need to get certified. Do you need to have a project in mind to get certified? No. So my advice to you is get started on your application for certification immediately, even if you don't know there's a project out there that you're interested in. But if you think you're going to do city business eventually, get started now, because the application process, the review process, all that takes time. And so you don't want to see an opportunity and then, or have a prime contractor ask you whether you're certified, and then you're not, and you miss out on the opportunity when you could have gotten started early. So get started right away. Now, what's the benefit of the certification? I think I have to talk a little bit about that for you to be interested in the workshop on certification, and then also, I think, just to talk about some other matters. So basically, the MBE, WBE programs, they basically require goals in certain contracts of a certain amount of participation by historically disadvantaged firms on projects. And so, for example, we might be awarding a contract, and in our specs, we might determine that the appropriate participation based on vendors that are out there and based on the work, we might say, you know, there's 16% requirement of MBE participation, and let's say, you know, 6% WBE participation. Okay. So, what does that mean? It basically means that if a non-certified firm is going to bid, they have to identify a real MBE firm that's certified, or multiple firms, and a real WBE certified firm or multiple WBE firms to participate on the contract with them when they bid. And they have to identify who they're going to use when they bid. And let's say in my example, there's 16% MBE requirement. It means the prime has to bring in a MBE subcontractor that's going to perform 16% of the real work, not just get paid, but do 16% of real work, and in exchange for that, get 16% of the contract dollars for that real work. So real work being done and real pay being received by the MBE firm. So if it's a $100,000 contract, the MBE firm is going to work for $16,000 and actually get paid $16,000. Why do we care so much about the work side of it? Why don't we stop with just, hey, we just want to make sure that $16,000 goes to an MBE firm? Well, because the program's purpose is not just to have the money flow through to an MBE firm. It's also to make sure that MBE firms are building capacity with experience on city projects, experience on the type of work, and the benefit is obviously that a historically disadvantaged person or group will get to build a business and be in the marketplace. The benefit to us is we're going to have yet another vendor that is going to be part of the competition in the future, arguably driving prices down. So it strengthens our vendor community, and that's good for the community, and that's good for the city as far as prices. And the same explanation goes for WBE firms, right? So in my example, 6%. So on my $100,000 contract suggestion or example, a WBE firm will be brought on to do $6,000 worth of work and get $6,000 in exchange for that work, with the same principles behind why we're doing it. Now, the work has to be done in the specialty area of that firm. So when you get certified as an MBE or WBE, you get certified in a specialty area. It's basically what's your line of work. You get certified in your line of work. You can have more than one line of work. You just have to make sure you put in for getting certification and prove up that you qualify for each line of work. And once you get certified, you're not stuck. If you grow and you start taking on new responsibilities in your company, you can always do expansion requests, and you can keep adding specialty areas to your certification. Now, if you want to know the specialty areas, what you can do is you can look at what they're based on. They're based on what we call NAICS codes, basically NAIC S, NAICS. But if you Google NAIC, basically you Google the NAICS codes, you can look it up, and it's a nationwide standard, and it basically breaks down all industries into categories and then into subcategories, and you can get an idea of what specialty areas you might fall into. It's good to get familiar with that because that's the language you'll be talking when you talk with our certification department about what your specialty area is. Now, we take it very seriously. We investigate, we review certification applications. Even once you're certified, we do site inspections, visits. We monitor whether or not a firm really should have their certification. Make sure it's not a front company. Make sure it's a legitimate, so that those that are really in need of the program are benefiting from it. We also make sure, though, on the other end of the spectrum, that these certified firms are getting paid. So we monitor subcontractor payments. Primes actually have to report payments to subcontractors, and we keep track of that to make sure that the programs requirements are being met. We also ensure compliance with the Chicago Residency Ordinance requirement and equal employment opportunity commitments. So we're all about not just getting contracts in place, but once contracts are in place, we're all about following through and making sure there's compliance. Okay. Just so you know, the Chicago Residency Ordinance says that for a contract that is estimated at $100,000 or more and is funded by the City of Chicago, 50% of the total work hours must be performed by actual residents of the City of Chicago. And then also for equal employment opportunity, in order to promote equality and opportunity for minority and female personnel on city-funded construction projects, there's an award determination that must be inserted in each contract specification that is over $100,000. And bidders are invited to propose the Minority and Female Employee Utilization Goals. Basically, what I'm pointing out is procurement is not about just awarding contracts. Procurement is also about furthering certain social goals that the city has. And we not only want to get all the goods and services that the city needs at the best price that we can, but we also want to make sure that city dollars are being used for the benefit of the community. And so through our procurement process, we're doing our best to make that happen. As far as MBE, WBE, and DBE compliance, there are several ways you can achieve compliance. A prime can bid as an MBE, WBE, or DBE firm itself. An MBE and WBE or DBE can joint venture with other certified firms and bid together. You can subcontract work, as I described, to MBE, WBE, and DBE firms. And then you can also find certified suppliers. I talked about some of the reporting requirements. This slide basically explains that we do monitor payments to subcontractors, and we do make sure that we get certified payrolls and waivers of liens. So we want to make sure those that are supposed to be paid are getting paid. We have a bunch of programs. I have a specific workshop on programs and incentives, but I just want to list them here so you're aware. If you feel like one of these might be relevant to you, you might want to come to the other workshop. So Small Business Initiative for Construction is one program. Diversity Credit Program involves utilization of certified firms. And there's also a Mentor Protege program that I talk about at the workshop for vendors that are interested in being mentored by a larger, more experienced contractor. Bid incentives for small business enterprises, veteran-owned business enterprises owned by people with disabilities, city-based manufacturers, city-based businesses, firms that use apprentices, and companies that use alternatively powered vehicles. There are incentives out there. If you feel like any of these categories are something that is relevant or interesting to you, either show up to the workshop about programs and incentives, or stick around after this program and talk to me about it. perhaps I can give you some more insight to see if it's something that's worthwhile for you. DPS website, we keep it posted with or updated with a lot of information. I encourage you to go to our web page specifically at cityofchicago.org/procurement and just wander around. I think it's a great way to get familiar with our resources, our opportunities. Also, we list our policies and procedures. So remember I talked about there's federal law, there's state law, there's municipal code. Well, our day-to-day operations are in accordance with the policies and procedures that we post. So again, to be a good competitor, it's good to know about our policies and procedures and how day-to-day business operates at the City of Chicago Department of Procurement Services. So go to our webpage, cityofchicago.org/procurement. You can look up awarded contracts. You can look up payments that have been made to vendors. You can look up, as I mentioned, bid tabulations after a bid opening, weekly bid opportunities. If you need to find a certified firm, if you're not certified and you need to identify a certified firm to bring on board, we have a directory. We also list our bid incentives, our policies, procedures, and regulations that I mentioned, and it's all at cityofchicago.org/enter into one. You can go to that icon, click through it. It'll go to a web page that allows you to go to us. I think it's Park District is the other one. It's by default already set on us, so click on that. And it brings you to a search engine that looks like this. And you can click on, you can look up vendors, and then if you want to see a contract, there's contracts and awards. You can't really see it on the screen well. But if you go there, it's a search engine that allows you to search by contract number, specification number. You can search by, you can search by, did I say vendor name? You can describe a project, search by that. So you can do a whole lot of, you can go about searching for information in many ways. It's a great way for you to get familiar with what we're buying, how we're buying it, what we're paying, when we're paying, and it gives you a good idea for what it's like to do business with us. Now, I've walked you through our process. What I want to do beyond our process, even though it's outside of procurement services necessarily, is just explain to you, once you've got your contract, doing business with the City of Chicago is a lot like the private sector. So you go through this extensive process with us to, in a fair manner, get your opportunity, and let's say you win, you get a contract with the City of Chicago. Your contract is not with procurement services. Your contract is with whatever department has the need. So let's say police cars are what you bid on. You want to sell police cars to the city. Your contract's not with the Department of Procurement Services. You're not selling to procurement services. We don't buy police cars. We don't buy much, actually. We buy office supplies, pretty much. Police cars are bought by the police department. Fire trucks, if you sell those, are the fire department. If you're selling computers and software, Department of Information Technology is going to be your client. That department is going to be who you work with. Once you get a contract, you have a business relationship with the city, but really that's your customer, is the department. That department's going to, on an ongoing basis while you have an active contract, be the one who you're going to be receiving orders from or releases from. When you receive that order or release, be familiar with all the specifications of your contract, like how many days you were supposed to deliver within, what you're supposed to deliver, right? So if you order, say the police department orders police cars, and the spec said that they had to be red, white, and blue, four-door police cars, and let's say 3 months into the contract, you find out you can get the best deal on a two-door police car that is red in color. No, you have to look at what the police are ordering, what your client is ordering. You have to look at what the contract asks you to deliver, and you have to deliver in accordance with that contract. It works both ways, though. If a department asks you for something outside the contract, then you're not supposed to deliver outside the contract, right? You deliver exactly what it is the contract obliges you to deliver. When you deliver, you don't invoice the Department of Procurement Services. You invoice just like you do in the private sector. You're a customer, right? So in my example, if there's a police car and you deliver that red, white, and blue police car with 4 doors, the way the contract says, you invoice the department. The police department then, in that example, is going to review your invoice. They're going to double check with their folks down at the bay or wherever the garage is, were those police cars delivered? And if it's confirmed the police car was delivered, you know, does it look the way we're supposed to have police cars? Does it drive the way we're supposed to have police cars drive? If all that's confirmed, that means you delivered in accordance with the contract, and the police department will then send or forward the invoice to the city's comptroller. The city's comptroller will match up the invoice and the approval, and they will, match it up with the contract that's generated by our department, and they will then approve payment if everything matches up. Comptroller will then send you your check. Now, let's say in that process, you deliver something you believe was in accordance with the contract, and the department says, no, that's not what we ordered. Then there might be a dispute. That's when we get back into the picture. You can file what's called a dispute. There are policies on our webpage where you believe you delivered what you were supposed to deliver, you didn't get paid, and then you can file a dispute, and we will arbitrate or mediate the dispute. The department might do the same thing. They might say, we placed this order 60 days ago, and the contract requires delivery within 30 days. We haven't gotten it yet. We would like you to send a default letter or cure letter to the vendor. And that's when we get involved. We might send a letter to you saying, hey, you're not delivering in accordance with your contract. Please get on your game and do it within 10 days or do it within 30 days or whatever time is appropriate. So disputes are an area where we get back involved. So just keep in mind, you've got your customer, you're doing business with them. It's not much different than the private sector. We are in the background hovering, I guess you might want to say, in case we're needed, but we're not really in the business relationship with you. We want it to be a smooth, hopefully we did our job right and there's a good contract in place and everyone's expectations are clear, everyone's rights and responsibilities are clear. If that's the case, you're going to have a nice opportunity to deliver goods and services and make some money in the process from the city. So it's a good opportunity to get together in that business relationship. When the contract is done, typically each contract has a term. It might be a 2-year term, might be a 5-year term. There might be some extension options that we can exercise if we need to continue the contract for a certain amount of time. But at the end of the day, the contract will eventually come to an end. And when it does, we will re-advertise the opportunity, maybe revise the specs based on some new needs, and then the opportunity goes out again. I mention that only because don't be discouraged if you look and see that you sell something and the city already has a contract for it. Eventually that contract will come to an end and you will get your opportunity. So monitor when it comes to an end and be ready to look for our solicitation when it does. With that in mind, I encourage you to look for opportunities. I encourage you to learn more about our process. Go to the workshops. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there if you just are diligent about being aware and then taking action when you see an opportunity that presents itself. I'll look forward to seeing you at future workshops. Hopefully this sparked your interest and you'll be back. And as I mentioned at the beginning, please reach out to me in the future if you have any questions or you need me as a resource. I'll be glad to respond. And I will wrap it up with questions and answers. Does anyone have a question that they would like to ask? If you don't feel comfortable asking it with the audience or it's very project specific, then I'll be glad to take the question after the session.